I could not believe the beauty of that island, of the beauty of the atoll, and I thought to myself, my God, are we really going to atomize this gorgeous, gorgeous tropical atoll? And the truth is, yes, we were going to do that.
Ensign Ted Taylor found himself part of the U.S. Navy's advance team that sent 167 Bikinians into exile for 50 years.
I reported aboard the USS Sumner, which was an old submarine tender which had been converted into a geodetic survey ship. And I walked aboard, and the executive officer a few minutes later said, "You're going to be a diving officer." And I said, "Well, I haven't dived in my life. I snorkeled a little bit." He said, "We're going to give you 3 days to train, and then you're going to be in charge of a diving boat." And it was my job with a crew of divers to explode those coral heads and to clear the way for safe navigation in the lagoon itself.
Clearing the way for tests that would determine the effects of the atomic bomb was the job of Vice Admiral William Blandy, under orders from President Truman.
Some say these tests are too costly. They are not. The great majority of the target ships are obsolete. They are junk ships.
Blandy had to conduct these tests, despite a public that was ambivalent about the merits of developing atomic power.
The lessons learned may save many lives, many ships, and many millions of dollars by guiding future expenditures for national defense.
Blandy's first job was to find a location that provided anchorage for a large number of target vessels, a remote area that was either uninhabited or had a population that could be easily relocated. Bikini Atoll, an unknown speck in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, seemed the obvious location for testing nuclear explosives. To the Joint Chiefs of Staff, these experiments would be known as Operation Crossroads.
It will not blow out the bottom of the sea and let all the water run down the hole. It will not destroy gravity. I am not an atomic playboy.
By February of 1946, with the evacuation date only a month away, the time had come for Commodore Ben Wyatt to tell the Bikinians what it meant. It had to do with the atomic bomb, the winning weapon that ended the war and freed Bikini from Japanese occupation. What America needed now was to learn how to use this weapon for the good of all mankind and to end all world wars. Within hours, the Bikinians had agreed with King Judah. They would go. What took a little longer was this painstaking reenactment for cameras on the day they left.
Tell them that the United States government now wants to turn this great destructive force into something good for mankind.
Naval intelligence had told him in advance that these were very religious people. And so he used religion as the pry to get them to give up the atoll, to give up their islands. He told them that for 2 years, more or less, the islands would be used by the Navy and then would be returned to the people of Bikini.
Now they have heard of our plan for their evacuation. Will you ask King Judah to get up and tell us now what his people think and if they're willing to go?
Everything's good, and they're willing to go, and everything is God's hands.
Well, you tell them and King Judah that everything being in God's hands, it cannot be other than good.
After he came back to the ship, the USS Sumner, he sat in the wardroom, the officers' mess, for a little while and had coffee. And he told us what he had said on the beach, that God wanted them to give up their homeland for a short period of time, that the atomic scientists had a pact with God, and he compared them to the children of Israel.
As Wyatt had said, everything was in God's hands. The 125-mile eastward exodus to neighboring Rongerik Atoll would last only 2 years. To encourage the relocation, the Navy not only built a few houses on Rongerik, they rid the place of flies.
That day was a very sad day, as I remember. We helped them load their entire wealth onto an LST, a landing ship tank, which was drawn up onto the beach. Its wide doors had opened up. And they knew at that moment that they were going for at least 2 years. When it came by us, the people were all standing up on the upper deck and looking out, looking back toward Bikini Atoll, the main island of Bikini. And they were singing a hymn. We were mostly combat veterans on that ship. And the men that I saw lined up alongside me and along the rail all had tears in their eyes. There were tears in my eyes. So it was a very, very sad day.
"1946 saw the release of the film Gilda, starring Rita Hayworth. The term bombshell wasn't lost on the enlisted men of Operation Crossroads, who delighted in nicknaming every piece of hardware they got their hands on.
The Frisco quakes, so you can put the blame on me, boy. Put the blame.
More than 200 ships traveled to Bikini to participate in the tests. 93 of them were designated targets.
In the planning, the Army wanted those ships at Bikini as close together as possible, loaded up with ammunition, loaded up with fuel, because once that bomb went off, they wanted to blow those ships to smithereens. The Navy planners said, well, those ships can't be too close to one another, you've got to spread them way out. And there was this fascinating debate. And what the debate was the Navy didn't want their ships to sink. So what Operation Crossroads was about, it wasn't about testing atomic weapons, this was a show. And to a certain extent, this was a gesture to let the Russians know that, yes, we had more bombs, and there was a signal, let's put it that way. And I think that that was a large part of what the tests were about.
Radio broadcasters on the job are badly snafu'd by interference. All over the world, a broadcast that had suffered from too much buildup, as well as interference, was a severe letdown. But there was tension and anxiety as a metronome ticked away the last seconds.
And the man really caught in the middle was the father of the atomic bomb, was Robert Oppenheimer. He did not want to be involved at Bikini. He wrote a letter to President Truman asking to be removed from the committee. And it's my favorite line of all of my research of these thousands and thousands of documents. Here's one sentence in this letter to President Truman. And Oppenheimer said, and this is a direct quote, "If you drop an atomic bomb on a ship, you will sink it."
July 1, 1946. Everything was in place on the ground. Gilda was in the air, and the first test, officially named Able, was a go. In 1943, at Los Alamos, New Mexico, nuclear physicists were flirting with the unknown. One thing and one thing only they knew for certain, that splitting the atom had the potential to release great amounts of energy. Berlin Brixner, Jack Abbey, and Neil Davis are three of the atomic pioneers who worked at Los Alamos in the early 40s.
And that was the only road that was paved.
The activity was intense. I think everybody was dedicated to a common goal. Everybody wanted to do his best and do as much as he could to bring an end to World War II.
There was a job to do. We had a war to win. And the mood around Los Alamos was that the Germans might do this first.
The Los Alamos scientists fast-tracked their research, and by the spring of '45, their chemical invention was incorporated into the current state of weapon development. The first field test was set to detonate at nearby Alamogordo.
I was there assigned a job of photographing the implosion process. Now, I didn't even know anything about the implosion process, but I was simply brought there to learn to run a high-speed camera that my boss-to-be invented to photograph that implosion, and I did that successfully. The eye protection filter I had just seemed to turn as bright as the sun, and so I was just temporarily blinded by the light. I could not see any details of the explosion. It was just this filter that was white as the sun.
The mood was one of elation. We've done it. It works, that kind of thing. And they've accomplished the end, which there were people riding around in cars and beating drums and this kind of thing, and drinking more than they should. This was a little bit different. You see, Hiroshima was bombed just a few weeks later, and right after that, people began to sober up and that this is a pretty horrible thing.
It was the key factor in the end of World War II, and I'm very proud of that, in that hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of lives, both Japanese and American lives, were saved.
Well, this was beyond anything I ever dreamed of achieving as in the workplace as a physicist or chemist or whatever. And the feeling of doing your bit for the war was great too. And then, well, I don't know, the guilt's there a little bit for having enjoyed something that is so spectacularly devastating. And I'm to be forgiven for that, I guess.
After having the experience of photographing the Trinity explosion, they picked me to photograph with high-speed cameras again the explosion at Bikini. They didn't seem to hit that target exactly. However, my cameras had enough field of view that they would get the pictures anyway.
The bomb missed ground zero by half a mile. Test ships like the Saratoga and Nagato remained afloat. Lesser ships full of instruments for recording the effects of the blast were lost, however, and their data never recovered. The Carlisle, a merchant craft, was loaded to 95% capacity with fuel and ammo when she went down. Though sitting upright, she is a virtual pudding of melted metal, and proof enough for Joint Chiefs of Staff that Oppenheimer was right. The celebration was hardly dampened by the question of radiation, an unstudied phenomenon at the time. Many of these men would become grim evidence of radiation's lethal effects.
It's my view that there were severe overexposures of men at Bikini. The data shows it. No one has questioned that from the book or from the film. You're dealing here with anecdotal evidence. And ultimately, the problems faced by atomic veterans are very difficult because under U.S. law, you simply cannot sue the U.S. government for injuries that you receive while on active duty in the armed services. So most of these veterans have had very little recourse.
Carcasses of sheep, goats, and pigs would return to America for closer examination of the effects of radiation. For the bomb's ardent promoters, it was disturbing to learn that a few goats kept on eating right through the blast, the searing heat, and the subsequent shockwave. The Bikinians on Rongerik had run out of water and found the fish in the lagoon to be largely poisonous. What's more, or rather less, the coconuts were fewer and smaller.
And
425 miles south of Bikini, Kili is a single small island, a mere 200 acres. The Bikinians chose it because no other chief had claimed it, and for good reason. The island has no barrier reef to quell the pounding surf. With neither lagoon nor harbor, landing a boat is difficult at best and impossible for 5 months of the year. With no way to fish from their traditional outriggers, the Bikinians became dependent on American canned food. With no chain of islands comprising an atoll, the Bikinians soon felt trapped on Kili, with no place to go. Former American Peace Corps volunteer Jack Niedenthal is trust liaison and representative for the people of Bikini.
The amount of different kind of people I have to work with, it can range from Bikinians with financial problems. If there's a Bikinian in the hospital that's maybe faced with an operation of some kind, then I would often get called to the hospital to go talk to the doctor to help the Bikinians decide whether or not to have the operation. I also am in daily contact with our professional people in the United States, and that includes lawyers, trustees, money managers, contractors, scientists, media people. As a liaison, I'm kind of in between the outside world and their local government and anything else they can find for me to do.
Elders gather to remember the day 50 years ago when they left Bikini. Some are embarrassed, some still angry. Many of them, nevertheless, find home movie humor, even in the context of a sad situation. On the day they left Bikini 50 years ago, they found solace in the spontaneous outpouring of their favorite hymn.
Kilo papa, kilo au burung, ime melogian, kena kar kada gini awal ben maju goyon kar pigini, innen siona menina au kar ajalo ilo rano ke cibong.
Ego ke mar perion piginian, kar ciono lamna ciono bebe. Kami ujar kare yari bendron lo alep kain menudem jit. Kalau lo juan ngapa jik, bagadam kaciringan kami udem celok. Elugun karam manam ko wai bendron. Em lagi yon corran ngao. Komo yulo dam karadan dukun corran.
From amongst the youngsters in that 1946 film footage, old-timers clearly identified 17-year-old Jenny Henry.
Kenan juga au biaya kemeron, ino kemeron apa jadi doan, biaya kemeron yang kemeron jutu, mana baca ino kemeron caya tak kemeron kamana, yang mana amiro yang.
Reuben Judah remembers his father, King Judah, returning to Bikini to watch the second atomic test, 3.5 weeks after Able, finding not one charred palm. He announced that his people would soon return home. The Americans reserved comment until after the next blast, an underwater experiment they called Baker. By 1954, Bikini's flora and fauna had naturally regenerated after 20 atomic blasts. But by now, the Soviet Union was a serious atomic contender. One of the atoll's lesser islands, Nam, would be required for a while longer for America's thermonuclear debut, an H-bomb dubbed Bravo.
This was the first time in the world heard about this development of a weapon 1,000 times more powerful even than the Hiroshima bomb. And of course it brought all my fears forward, because I knew that now the world is in real danger. Scientists felt that they have got to do something, because this all was the outcome of their work. And some of them felt responsible, almost personally responsible. And this is at the time when Bertrand Russell started the idea that scientists should get together in a conference and seek ways somehow to prevent the outbreak of a nuclear war. He got in touch with Albert Einstein, who was at that time the greatest living scientist, to ask his support, because he felt this was very important.
We ask your help in this fateful moment as sign that we scientists do not stand alone.
I agree. He asked Russell to write a sort of statement for this, which he will sign. Bertrand Russell was flying from Rome to Paris when the pilot announced the news that Einstein has just died. And Russell was shattered because he felt that without Einstein's support, the whole thing may collapse. But when he arrived in his hotel in Paris, there was a letter forwarded to him from London, a letter from Einstein, with his signature to the statement. This is one of the last acts in Einstein's life.
A sudden shift in wind direction exposed the residents of Rongelap and the sailors on Lucky Dragon, a Japanese fishing boat, to Bravo's radioactive fallout. One sailor soon died of radiation poisoning. Documents recently come to light suggest that the wind shift wasn't as unforeseen as officially reported, that the military, in fact, had 2 hours' notice of changing conditions and chose to ignore it. A monument to the Lucky Dragon ensures that the Japanese will not forget Bikini's role in the early years of the Cold War. The dying fisherman's last words are carved in stone. "Please make sure that I am the last victim of the bomb." The newest generations of Bikinians, born and bred on Kili, have little desire to return to the distant island they've only heard about, and even less enthusiasm to revert to a way of life that strikes them as more primitive. It's a love-hate relationship Bikinians have with America. Proof of that is found in their own version of the Stars and Stripes. 23 stars represent their islands. 3 black ones, set aside, stand in memory of the islands vaporized in the atomic tests. Jonathan Weisgall, counsel for the Bikinians, launched a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the U.S. government in 1987.
That lawsuit sought several $100 million of damages. The U.S. government moved to dismiss it. Eventually, that lawsuit was folded into the Compact of Free Association, the treaty between the U.S. and the Marshall Islands government, and resulted in the establishment of a $75 million trust fund for the people of Bikini for their compensation, money to them.
Nearly 1,000 Bikinians reside on Kili. Many still live in plywood shacks built for the first arrivals in 1948. Traditions particular to atoll life have gone unpracticed for decades, rendering many of the youth unfocused and leaving many elders with an unspoken sense of humiliation.
Rainin awole be arme raini be agagiyo unio eni nerik ag arme ye jirregiyo innemi erranri wi beri megro bachero jigir na yi magano mi bu dab kemin kaligi kemi ya ye raiberia ke pedawo deni na mi chini ngeganu e chelo chigin arme na beri.
I mean, to me, this is a great, great sin, and it's a sin that the Bikinians will never let the U.S. government forget. As long as there's a Bikinian alive on the earth, they will be constantly reminding the U.S. government of this promise that was made and this promise that was broken.
Bikini is one of 29 far-flung Micronesian atolls. Its shallow lagoon and coral reefs are patrolled by gray reef sharks and yellowfin tuna. Turtles and crabs nest in the shoreline once again, while coconut palms, pandanus, papayas, and breadfruit complete the illusion of an undisturbed paradise. Only a closer examination of the cemetery reminds the visitor of a curious break in the continuity of life on Bikini. In 1996, the Bikinians hired Fabio Amaral, a Brazilian, to run a diving business in what has been described as a nuclear theme park. The first to dive the wrecks was Edward Madison, a Bikinian and current dive master with the operation. His clients are unanimous about which ship they want to see first, the Saratoga. The Baker blast tore open the hull on her starboard quarter and ruptured her bottom plating. Her last minutes were slow and tortured, remarked an eyewitness. She fought and would not sink, but slowly she was engulfed by the reaching waters, and the tip of her mast was the last bit of the Sarah seen by man. The only diveable aircraft carrier in the world, the USS Saratoga, all 880 feet of her sits perfectly upright in 180 feet of water. Her bridge stands tall, 40 feet beneath the surface. "90 feet down, we find rivets showing on her deck. Her runway scorched clean off by the power of Baker's firestorm. A survivor of 2 torpedo attacks and 5 kamikazes, the 39,000-ton Saratoga was the largest and busiest aircraft carrier in the world. 7 times she was reported sunk by the Japanese. The Sarah sank with 3 Helldiver Navy single-engine dive bombers aboard. An Avenger torpedo bomber can still be found in the hangar below decks. The Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in San Francisco is working on trying to make Bikini habitable again. Bill Robison is in charge of the Marshall Islands cleanup program and makes twice-yearly trips for updates. One question above all others Robison needs to answer soon: what timetable for repatriation can the Bikinians reasonably hope for?
Our work began on Bikini in 1978 and has been ongoing since then. And over the years, we have evaluated several methods for reducing the dose that people would get if they returned to live on Bikini. And we had found throughout our work that the major dose was delivered via the terrestrial food chain from the uptake of a radionuclide called 137 cesium that's produced in a nuclear detonation, and that is chemically very similar to potassium, an element that's required for all plant growth. In fact, it's an essential element for people as well. And so when we're in the islands, we collect many coconuts from all these experiments. We collect the breadfruit because that's a key part of their diet. We also take samples of pandanus fruit and papaya fruit, anything that we find that the people grow and use in the diet.
At the lab in San Francisco, tests indicate that fertilizing Bikini's topsoil with potassium every 5 years would reduce the plant uptake of cesium to just 5% of current levels. That would allow islanders to eat locally grown food without receiving excessive doses of radiation. 17 treatments over the next century would eliminate the need to proceed with the more radical Plan B.
The scraping option is a lot more detailed operation in that it takes a lot of time to move the amount of soil that would be required to scrape the entirety of Bikini Island. So that resettlement would take a little longer, but in any case, with the potassium method, resettlement could occur within a year.
In 1968, President Lyndon Johnson declared Bikini safe for a homecoming. A gradual repatriation ended 10 years later when 139 residents were found to be ingesting incredible amounts of radioactive cesium with their local food supply.
While most Bikinians no longer remember the events from 1946, they vividly remember the events in the late 60s, early 70s when they were back at Bikini, and scientists kept coming to Bikini telling them everything was okay. And those scientists were wrong. And there remains a lingering distrust, not a dislike, but a distrust of these scientists. Are they really right this time?
There are signs on Bikini of an imminent return of at least some of the islanders. The brand new King Judah lab will be training Bikinians to test their own soil. So far, however, most of the people we find on Bikini today are visitors who spend most of their time in the water. Bob Gore, an ex-Navy pilot, has returned to the Saratoga.
People always ask what it's like making a carrier landing on anything, and it's a large charge is what it boils down to. It's a hell of a lot of fun. You drop down and your tail hook hopefully caught a wire. The idea of seeing a carrier on the bottom, the only one that's apparently available as far as diving is concerned, it's hard to resist.
Bob finds a different Saratoga. Her deck at the stern collapsed along its axis by metal fatigue, or perhaps by the impact of the deluge that pounded her as the heavens opened during the Baker blast. Massive bow led the way through many campaigns. No mission gained the Saratoga more respect, however, than the post-war Operation Magic Carpet, when she ferried 29,000 veterans home from the Pacific. Only months before the experiments for which she was sacrificed. Dive master Fabio Amaral impresses upon all who come to Bikini that they're dealing with depths beyond recreational limits. Diving these wrecks is for advanced divers only.
We had a big challenge in front of us because everything here is beyond the recreational sport diving limit of 130 feet. So it involves deep water diving and involves decompression diving.
This American destroyer took part in the search for Amelia Earhart. The USS Lamson, at 50% capacity for both fuel and ordnance when she sunk, is one of a dozen major ships lying within 1,000 yards of the Able and Baker blasts. Her torpedoes look as ready to attack today as they did during World War II, when she earned 5 service battle stars. The 312-foot submarine USS Apogon also received 5 battle stars. Down 150 feet, the shadowy but dramatic silhouette of her conning tower commands the respect of seasoned wreck divers. The 29,000-ton battleship USS Arkansas lived through 2 world wars and saw action around the world, from the invasion of Normandy to Iwo Jima. She lies inverted and seriously damaged at 170 feet down. Live explosives, including bombs and depth charges, are scattered about her. Today, the Carlisle is reduced to a heap of atomic rubble. A gun on her stern, the only feature that testifies to her once proud form and function. A school of Jacks have found her remains particularly homey. While a gray reef shark guards the mangled hulk as if memories of her former glory were a constant source of food for thought. Here lies the Nagato, once the world's largest warship, and the only Japanese battleship still afloat when the war ended. Only by the juxtaposition of a diver can the magnitude of her upended screws be appreciated. 32,720 tons of battleship lie buried in the sand. Her armaments include 8 .45 caliber guns, 20 .50 caliber guns, 4 anti-aircraft guns, and 8 torpedo tubes. Shells from her 16-inch guns were reportedly dropped as bombs. Flagship to the Japanese Navy, the 708-foot Nagato was Admiral Yamamoto's floating fortress, from whose bridge he ordered and directed the attack on Pearl Harbor. The Nagato would later serve as the site of the Japanese surrender in 1945. Beyond the lagoon and her protected fleet of ghost ships lies an altogether different sight. Sharks. Hundreds of them. outside the reef. They're an ancient Bikinian totem, traditional protectors of the atoll. Today, Bikini is much as Ted Taylor found it over 50 years ago. Taylor, now an author, has reworked his memories into a fictional children's book, The Bomb. Set against the events of the Bikinian Exodus, Taylor invents a story by simply asking, what if? What if there was a boy who felt that he alone could stop Operation Crossroads? What if he could stop the bomb from falling?
I met a boy called Sorry. Sorry greeted me on the beach with the most beautiful smile that I'd ever seen on any kid. And he offered in sign language to show me around the island. And we established a kind of a friendship, even though we couldn't talk to each other. And I later used him as the main character in a book called The Bomb. He alone would try to stop the U.S. Navy. He went out with the school teacher, a preacher, a reverend, and they went back to the target area near the Nevada and thought that perhaps the bombardiers up in the B-29 and not drop the bomb.
Sore Jayleng is one of the many Bikinians who never have and never will find their way back home. The Bikinians have always listened to Jonathan Weisgall when he talks money. He's still talking, but now it's about income that can be derived from economic development, including one very lucrative idea: storing the world's nuclear waste. The very idea triggers a Technicolor case of déjà vu.
The question of nuclear storage came up about 3 or 4 years ago. My own view, my own personal view was that at one island called Nam, which was adjacent to the Bravo shot, it's 24 miles from Bikini. It could never be cleaned up. It never formed an important part of the Bikinians' culture. And since 1954, Nam has been a high-level nuclear storage site, for lack of a better term. To turn that into a high-level, to a storage site for spent nuclear fuel struck me as something that the Bikinians should at least study.
When they bring up these offers of instant wealth, they're playing on something that the Bikinians have become very accustomed to over the years. The only thing they have had in their lives over the past 20 years to take away their sorrow, to help them forget about their homeland and the things that they once enjoyed, the place that they know is there waiting for them. The only thing they have had is money.
The voice of the Bikinians should be no more conflict anywhere in the world. Why the political will is still lacking is that we've been conducting problems of security, the policy about security, along the same lines which have been going on not only during the 50 years of the nuclear age, but going back 2,000 years or more of the whole of our civilization. It's always been based on a principle, on a dictum, si vis pacem para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. In view of the fact that the whole of mankind is threatened, we must change the motto. The dictum must now be si vis pacem para pacem. If you want peace, prepare for peace.
In the modern history of Bikini, we find an impressionable people whose trust has provided a valuable reflection of American power. Of what significance is such a darkly graphic chapter of history, if not in the lessons it has to offer? If Commodore Wyatt's promise to the Bikinians was true, that since everything was in God's hands, it could not be other than good, do we not have a responsibility to expedite the restoration of this good as understood by those who surrendered to it so innocently, so long ago?